Feeling alone. Most people feel alone, even when they're not. You could be sitting in a room full of people and still feel like no one really knows you. You could have friends, a family, even a partner, and still feel like you're the only one inside your head. That's something people don't talk about. We just assume loneliness means being physically alone, but that's not what most people are afraid of. What they're really afraid of is being unseen, misunderstood, ignored, or worse, forgotten. You probably know what it's like to be around people and still feel disconnected. You laugh when they laugh, you say what you're supposed to say, but there's this gap between you and them. You can feel it. It's like being behind a window, watching the world, but not really in it. Sometimes you wonder if you're just bad at socializing. Maybe you're too quiet, too awkward. Maybe something's wrong with you. But the truth is, most people feel this way. They just hide it better. We were never really taught how to connect beyond the surface. We learn how to make small talk, how to follow social rules, how to say things that sound normal. But no one shows us how to actually feel close to someone. It's not that we don't want to, it's that we don't know how. We don't know how to talk about the stuff that really matters without making things weird. We don't know how to ask someone if they're okay and mean it. We don't know how to say, "I feel alone," without sounding like something's wrong with us. So we pretend. We post pictures online, we reply with emojis, we send LOL even when we're not laughing. We answer, "I'm good," without thinking. We tell ourselves we're just tired, just busy, just distracted. But under all of that, there's this quiet ache. You want someone to notice it, but you don't want to seem needy. You want someone to understand, but you're not sure how to explain it. So you just carry it. And when it builds up, you start to question everything. You wonder if you're hard to love, if you're too quiet, too different, too much. You start analyzing every conversation, replaying moments in your head. You start holding back, playing it safe, staying quiet even when you want to speak. All because you're scared of being misunderstood or worse, ignored. You might scroll through your phone, hoping someone texts you first. You might stare at old messages, trying to feel close to someone who isn't there anymore. You might stay in friendships or relationships that don't feel right, just to avoid that empty space. But here's something nobody really tells you. Feeling alone doesn't always mean something's wrong with your life. Sometimes it just means you've been hiding parts of yourself for too long. You've been shrinking, filtering, adjusting, just to fit in. And the more you do that, the further you drift from real connection. Because people can't see you if you never show them who you really are. It takes effort to be honest, to say what you actually think, to ask someone a real question, to admit you're struggling. It's uncomfortable, and most people avoid it. But it's the only way to stop feeling invisible. Not by being louder, not by being more impressive, but by being real.
You don't need more followers or more people around you. You need one honest moment. One conversation where you say something true. One connection that doesn't feel forced. That's what breaks the loneliness. Not instantly, but slowly, quietly. It starts with saying something you normally keep to yourself, and then seeing what happens. Most people are craving that kind of connection, but no one wants to be the first to admit it. They're all waiting for someone else to go first. So maybe it starts with you. Not in a big way, just in one small moment. A message, a question, a truth. That's how it begins. Because when you stop pretending, people can finally see you. And when they see the real you, that's when you stop feeling alone.
Overthinking everything. You probably do it without even realizing. You lie in bed and your mind starts going in circles. A small mistake from earlier suddenly becomes a big deal. A sentence you said plays over and over. You wonder how it sounded, how it looked, what they thought. You imagine every possible way it could have gone differently. You replay arguments in your head. You rehearse conversations that haven't even happened. You think of worst-case scenarios and act like you're preparing, but really, you're just exhausting yourself. Overthinking is one of those things that seems harmless on the surface. It looks like you're just being careful. You're just trying to understand, just trying to be prepared. But slowly, it wears you down. It takes simple moments and makes them complicated. It turns temporary feelings into permanent worries. And the worst part is, it feels like you're doing something useful, like you're solving something, but you're not. You're stuck. It usually starts with uncertainty. You say something and you're not sure how it was taken. You meet someone new and you're not sure if they liked you. You make a decision and you're not sure if it was the right one. So your brain fills the gap. It creates 100 versions of what could have happened. It tries to predict what people are thinking. It tries to explain things you can't see. But none of it brings peace. It just adds more noise. You might think if you overthink enough, you'll finally figure it out. But you never do. The answers never come. You just end up tired, drained, confused, and even more unsure than before. Because thinking doesn't always lead to clarity. Sometimes it just leads to more thinking. What most people don't realize is that overthinking isn't about the situation. It's about control. You're trying to control the outcome, control how people see you, control the future, control your image. But deep down, you know you can't. That's why it never ends. You keep going, hoping this next thought will fix it. But the next thought brings another one, and another. And soon, your mind isn't a tool. It's a trap. You question everything. You second-guess your instincts. You doubt your decisions. And the more you think, the less you trust yourself. That's what overthinking does. It steals your confidence quietly. It replaces action with hesitation. It turns small moments into big problems. And it tells you it's protecting you. But it's not. Sometimes you just need to admit that you don't know, that you can't control what other people think, that not every moment has a deeper meaning, that sometimes things just happen. And that's okay. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means giving yourself a break. You don't need to analyze every word. You don't need to predict every outcome. You don't need to figure it all out before you act. Sometimes the most freeing thing you can do is say, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm okay with that. There is a peace that comes when you stop trying to make everything perfect, when you stop expecting yourself to be right all the time, when you stop assuming the worst. You realize that most of the things you were afraid of never actually happened. They only lived in your mind, and your mind made them feel real. That's the danger of overthinking. It makes imaginary problems feel urgent. It makes tiny doubts feel like huge red flags. It makes simple decisions feel impossible. And it convinces you that the only way out is to keep thinking. But the truth is, thinking more isn't the answer. Thinking less isn't either. What you really need is space, a pause, a moment to breathe and step back and ask, is this helping me? Most of the time, the answer is no. The moment you recognize that, something shifts.
You don't have to solve every thought. You don't have to untangle every possibility. You don't have to keep spinning in circles. You can just stop. Let it be unclear. Let it be imperfect. Let it be unfinished. Because life is rarely clear. People are rarely simple. Emotions are rarely neat. And the truth is, you don't need to understand everything to move forward. Sometimes you just move. You take the next step even with questions in your head. And in that step, you find relief. Not because you figured it all out, but because you finally gave yourself permission to stop trying. That's when things get quieter. Not silent, but quieter. Your thoughts don't disappear, but they lose their grip. You still think, but you're not stuck. You still care, but you're not consumed. And in that space, you begin to trust yourself again. You realize you don't need to overthink every part of your life to make it work. Sometimes life works better when you stop trying so hard to control it.
Fear of judgment. You probably think about what other people think of you more than you want to admit. It's not because you're insecure, it's because you're human. From the time you were young, you learned that being accepted meant being safe. So you adjusted. You paid attention to how people responded. You noticed when they liked you, when they didn't, when they looked at you a certain way. And over time, that awareness turned into something heavier. You began to filter yourself. You became careful. You started holding parts of yourself back, not because you wanted to lie, but because you didn't want to be judged. Judgment feels like rejection, and rejection feels like danger. That's how your brain sees it. And even if no one says anything out loud, the fear is there. You walk into a room and you wonder what people see. You talk and you think about how your words sound. You try to express yourself, but then you wonder if you're being too much or not enough. You change little things, your tone, your expression, your opinion, just to keep things smooth. Just to avoid the look, the silence, the awkward shift that tells you you've gone too far. Most people are carrying this fear constantly. Even the confident ones. Even the loud ones. It doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like being overly nice. Sometimes it looks like saying nothing at all. But underneath, it's the same thing. The fear that if you show who you really are, people will walk away. You might not realize how much of your life is shaped by that fear. The clothes you wear, the things you post, the opinions you keep to yourself, the dreams you hide because they sound unrealistic, the parts of you that you never talk about. It all adds up. And at some point you stop knowing where the real you ends and the filtered version begins. You start living for approval, and you might get it, likes, compliments, praise, but it doesn't feel as good as you thought it would. Because deep down you know they're not reacting to the full version of you. They're reacting to the version you've carefully crafted. And if people only like the version you created, then it's hard to feel truly seen. That's the trap of fear.
Here's what people don't tell you. Almost everyone is scared of being judged. Not just you. And most of the time, the judgment you're afraid of isn't even happening. People are too busy worrying about how they're being seen to spend time picking you apart. But the fear makes you imagine it anyway. It makes you second-guess yourself. It makes you shrink. You tell yourself to wait until you're more confident, more prepared, more perfect. But that day never really comes. Because confidence doesn't come from being flawless. It comes from being honest, even when you feel exposed. It comes from showing up without the mask and realizing the world didn't end. It's not about forcing yourself to be loud or bold or different. It's about slowly letting go of the idea that you need to be anyone else, that you need to perform to belong, that you need to hide to be safe. The truth is, You're always going to be judged by someone, no matter what you do. You'll be too quiet for one person, too loud for another, too weird, too normal, too intense, too relaxed. You can't control how people see you, but you can control how much that matters to you. And that shift makes all the difference. When you stop chasing approval, you start moving in a direction that feels right for you. You stop trying to impress people who don't even know you. You stop needing to prove anything. It's not easy. You'll still hear the voice in your head that says, "Be careful." You'll still have moments where you feel exposed. But over time, you'll learn to hear that voice and keep going anyway. You'll learn to live without waiting for permission. And eventually, you'll find people who see the unfiltered version of you and stay. Not because you impressed them, but because you were real. That kind of connection lasts longer. That kind of approval means something. But it only happens when you stop hiding. You don't need to be perfect to be accepted. You don't need to be polished to be respected. You just need to be honest. That's the part no one teaches you, but it's the part that changes everything.
The pressure to be happy. There's something strange about the way happiness is talked about. It's everywhere, on products, in quotes, in ads, on social media. Everywhere you look, someone is telling you to be positive, be grateful, look on the bright side. And if you're not happy, there's this quiet message that says something must be wrong with your mindset, with your choices, maybe even with you. That's the pressure. The idea that you're supposed to feel good all the time, like being happy isn't just a goal, it's a requirement. You see people online who seem to have it all figured out, smiling, traveling, glowing. They say things like, "Choose happiness," as if it's a switch you can flip anytime, as if sadness is just a mistake in your thinking. So when you wake up feeling low, you don't just feel bad, you feel guilty. You feel like you failed. You wonder why you're not like them, why you can't just snap out of it, why you're stuck in your head when everyone else seems to be moving forward. And that guilt makes everything worse. Because now you're not just dealing with the hard feeling, you're also blaming yourself for having it. No one teaches you that it's normal to feel off, that life doesn't always feel good, that sadness isn't a sign that you're broken, it's just part of the process. Emotions don't follow a straight line. They come in waves. You can be grateful and still feel empty. You can love your life and still have days where you don't want to get out of bed. You can have friends and family and still feel lonely. None of that means something is wrong. It just means you're human. The pressure to be happy turns natural emotions into problems. It makes you feel like you need to hide your struggles, smile through your pain, laugh it off, tell people you're fine even when you're falling apart. And the more you do that, the more alone you feel. Because now not only are you hurting, but no one knows. No one sees what you're carrying. And the longer that goes on, the heavier it gets. You might start avoiding people, or pretending more, or distracting yourself with noise, shows, scrolling, staying busy, anything to avoid sitting with the feeling. Because if you stop, if you slow down, it all comes back. The sadness, the anxiety, the emptiness. And you don't want to feel that. You've been taught to avoid it, to fix it, to push it away. But some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be felt. That's what nobody says, that maybe the goal isn't to feel happy all the time. Maybe the goal is to feel real, to let yourself experience the full range of being alive, the joy, the sadness, the fear, the calm, all of it, not just the bright parts. Because if you numb the pain, you also numb the joy. If you avoid discomfort, you miss the moments of real clarity that often come after.
The constant push to be happy can actually make you feel worse. It can make you overlook the things that are working. It can make you ignore the progress you've made. It can make you feel like you're always behind, always lacking, always chasing a feeling that never stays for long. Happiness was never meant to be permanent. It comes and goes, like everything else, and that's okay. You're not supposed to feel amazing every day. You're not supposed to wake up with purpose every morning. Sometimes, you're just getting through the day, and that counts too. That's not failure. That's part of it. You don't need to chase happiness to live a meaningful life. Some of the most meaningful moments are hard, uncomfortable, quiet, but they change you. They reveal things. They teach you what really matters. It's okay to feel off, to feel numb, to feel sad for no clear reason. You don't need to explain it or fix it right away. You just need to allow it, to stop fighting it. And when you stop fighting it, something shifts. The feeling might not disappear, but it becomes lighter, less sharp. Because now, you're not pretending anymore. You're not alone in this. So many people feel the same thing and say nothing. They smile through it, perform through it, but inside, they're just as confused, just as tired, just as lost. And the more we all pretend to be okay, the more we all believe we're the only ones who aren't. That's the lie. That everyone else is happy and you're the outlier. That everyone else figured it out and you're behind. You're not. You're just being honest. And that honesty is rare. It's uncomfortable, but it's real. And it's the only place true peace comes from. Not fake positivity, not forced gratitude, but from accepting how things are right now, even if they're not perfect. So maybe the real strength isn't in always being happy. Maybe it's in being okay with not being okay. Maybe it's in saying, today's hard, and letting that be enough. Maybe it's in letting go of the pressure to feel good, and instead learning how to just feel.
Why we feel empty. There's a kind of emptiness that's hard to explain. It doesn't always come from something obvious. Sometimes life is fine on the outside. Nothing is falling apart. You have food, a place to live, people around you. You go through your routine, get things done, maybe even smile and laugh. But underneath all of that, something feels off. Like there's a space inside you that nothing seems to fill. You might look around and wonder why you're feeling this way. You might even feel guilty for feeling it, because other people have it worse, right? So you tell yourself to be grateful. You remind yourself of all the good things. But still, the feeling stays. That quiet emptiness that doesn't go away just because you want it to. The reason most people feel empty isn't because they're broken. It's because they've been living on autopilot for too long, doing what they're supposed to do, saying what they're supposed to say, going where they're supposed to go. But somewhere along the way, they stopped asking if any of it actually meant anything to them. You get up, go to work, go home, repeat. You checked your phone, scroll through pictures, watch videos. You talk about things that don't matter just to fill the silence, and it all becomes a routine, a loop that looks like life but doesn't feel like it. And over time, the weight of that starts to build. You don't notice it right away, but one day you wake up and realize that you haven't felt truly alive in a long time. It's not that you're unhappy,
It's that you're disconnected. Disconnected from meaning, from purpose, from yourself. We were never taught how to build a life that feels real. We were taught how to be productive, how to succeed, how to follow rules. But no one tells you how to find what matters to you. No one tells you that you can be doing everything right and still feel completely lost. So you try to fix the feeling. You buy things, make plans, start new projects, set goals. Sometimes it helps, for a little while. You feel busy, focused, distracted. But when things quiet down, the feeling comes back. That same dull emptiness. The feeling that something is missing, even if you don't know what it is. That's the part that makes it so hard. You don't always know what you're missing. You just know that what you're doing isn't enough.
Some people try to fill that space with other people. They jump into relationships. They surround themselves with friends. They stay constantly connected. But even then, they feel alone. Because connection without depth doesn't fix emptiness. You can be around people and still feel like you're not really seen, not really known. Some people chase success. They tell themselves that once they reach a certain level, more money, more recognition, more freedom, then they'll feel okay. But when they get there, they realize that the feeling hasn't changed. They're just more tired now. The truth is, emptiness doesn't go away by adding more to your life. It goes away when you reconnect to what matters. When you stop doing things out of habit and start asking, why am I doing this? What am I hoping to feel? What have I been avoiding? Sometimes the emptiness is there because you've stopped being honest with yourself. You've pushed down parts of you that felt inconvenient. You've ignored your own needs because they didn't fit the script. You've silenced your voice so often that now you don't remember what it sounds like. The only way out of that is to start listening again. Not to what other people want, not to what the world expects, but to what you really need. And sometimes that need is something simple. Rest, silence, a conversation that matters, time alone, time away, a moment to breathe and think and remember who you are when no one's watching. Other times, it's bigger. A change you've been avoiding, a truth you've been denying, a decision you've been postponing. And that's scary because deep down, you know it will cost you something. Comfort, familiarity, maybe even approval. But it might be the only way to feel real again. Emptiness isn't something you fix in a day. It fades slowly over time as you start making choices that feel true, as you stop trying to impress people who don't understand you, as you stop forcing yourself to care about things that don't matter, as you start doing things that bring you peace, not just progress. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to know your ultimate purpose. You just need to take one honest step. Do one thing that feels real. Say one thing you've been holding in. Let one part of you come back to life. That's how the feeling starts to shift. That's how the emptiness slowly turns into something else. Not joy, maybe not even clarity, but something solid, something real, a sense that you're back in your own life again. Time is slipping. You look up one day and realize how fast it's all gone. A year passes, then another. You think back to who you were 5 years ago and wonder where the time went. You remember moments that felt recent but happened a decade ago. You see people around you changing, getting older, moving on, and something about it doesn't feel real. Time doesn't move in big events. It moves in small, quiet moments you barely notice. Waking up, getting dressed, walking to work, scrolling on your phone, making dinner, going to sleep, and repeating it again and again. At first, it feels like nothing, but after a while, you realize it's everything. That's where your life has been, inside all those small, forgettable hours. Most people don't notice how fast time is moving until something forces them to stop. A loss, a breakup, a health scare, a major change. And suddenly, the days don't feel endless anymore. Suddenly, you feel the urgency, the weight of the minutes, the fact that your time here isn't unlimited. But by the time you feel that, a lot of time has already passed. That's what makes it so strange. We all know that time is limited, but we don't act like it. We waste days on things we don't care about. We wait for the right moment to start something important. We tell ourselves we'll try later. Later becomes next week, then next year, then maybe never. It's easy to fall into the illusion that there's always more time, that you can always do it tomorrow. But then tomorrow comes and looks exactly like today, and you get comfortable, not happy, just used to it. Time slips when you stop paying attention. It slips when you stop choosing, when you start living the same day on repeat. When you fill your time with things that don't matter just to avoid the weight of the things that do. It's not always your fault. The world trains you for this, to stay busy, to stay distracted, to chase things that look impressive on the outside but leave you empty inside. You learn how to plan your week, but not how to value your time. You learn how to be efficient, but not how to be present. You know what your schedule looks like, but not what your life feels like. So time passes and you don't even realize what you've traded. You trade time for money, time for comfort, time for safety. And before long, you forget that it's the most valuable thing you have. Not because it's rare, but because once it's gone, you can't get it back.
You don't get to rewind. You don't get to pause. You only get right now. It's uncomfortable to think about. Most people avoid it. They joke about getting older. They laugh about being tired all the time. But underneath, there's a quiet panic. A fear that maybe they're running out of time without ever really using it. And it's not about doing something dramatic. You don't need to quit your job or travel the world or completely start over. It's about being honest, about noticing how you spend your time, about asking if the way you live today matches what you actually care about. Sometimes it's little things, the people you text, the conversations you avoid, the goals you keep pushing aside, the parts of yourself you keep promising to return to. Other times it's bigger, a job that drains you, a relationship that's gone cold, a life that doesn't reflect who you are anymore. You don't need to fix it all at once. You just need to stop pretending you have forever, because you don't. And that's not meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up. You still have time right now. Maybe not forever, but enough. Enough to start something small. Enough to tell someone the truth. Enough to take one risk. Enough to change direction. Enough to finally ask yourself, what do I want to do with the time I have left? Not in a big, dramatic way, but in a quiet, serious way. Because this is your life, no one else's. No one else is going to live it for you. No one else is going to stop the clock. And no one else will carry the weight of regret for the time you let slip away. You're not too late, but you won't always have this moment again. What you do with it is up to you.
Chasing validation. You probably don't even realize how much of what you do is for other people. You might tell yourself that you're doing it for you, that you're following your own goals, your own plans. But if you look closely, you'll start to see how many of your choices were shaped by the need to be seen a certain way. You want to be liked, respected, understood. You want people to think you're doing well, that you're successful, that you figured it out, that you're okay. It starts early. You're praised for being smart, so you keep trying to be the smartest. You're told you're kind, so you don't speak up when something bothers you. You're rewarded for staying quiet, for working hard, for doing what's expected. And you learn that being accepted means being useful, being easy, being impressive. So you chase that feeling, the approval, the praise, the smile, the pat on the back, the numbers, the titles, the attention. You post something online and check to see who saw it, who liked it, who commented. And if no one reacts, you wonder what's wrong. Was it not interesting enough? Did you say too much? Not enough? You might not admit it, but it bothers you because deep down you've tied your worth to the reaction you get. And when there's no reaction, it feels like you don't matter. You know you shouldn't think that way. You know validation shouldn't mean that much, but it still does. We all want to be seen. It's natural. But when that desire turns into a habit, a need, a dependency, you lose track of who you are. Because now you're not living for yourself. You're performing. You're shaping your life around what will get a good response. You filter your words. You hide your doubts. You stretch the truth. You do things not because they feel right, but because they look right. And after a while, you can't tell what's real anymore. You might get the attention you were looking for. You might get the recognition, but it doesn't feel like you thought it would. It feels hollow, temporary, because you know it's not for the real you, it's for the version of you that people like, the version that performs well. And now you feel stuck, because if you stop performing, will people still stay?
That's the fear, that without the achievements, without the charm, without the image, you're not enough. That if people saw the real you, they'd lose interest, walk away, forget about you. So you keep playing the role even when it exhausts you. You can't relax when you're chasing validation. You can't rest when your worth depends on how others see you. And you can't find peace if you're constantly checking your reflection through someone else's eyes. The hard truth is, you'll never be able to fully control how people see you. You can do everything right, say everything perfectly, and still be misunderstood, still be judged, still be ignored. And if your happiness depends on other people's reactions, then your peace will always be fragile. That doesn't mean you should stop caring completely. It just means you need to shift the focus. Instead of asking, what will they think? Start asking, what do I think? Instead of measuring your success by how others respond, measure it by how it feels. Does this choice make sense to me? Does it align with what I believe? Does it bring me closer to the life I actually want? Validation feels good, but it fades quickly. Self-respect lasts longer, and it's quieter. It doesn't always get applause. It doesn't always get noticed. But you feel it. In the way you carry yourself, in the way you sleep at night, in the way you stop explaining yourself to people who will never understand. The more honest you become, the more uncomfortable it gets. Not everyone will like it. Some people will pull away. Some will say you've changed. Some will get quiet. But that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes the people who fade were never really with you. They were with the version of you
that made them comfortable. You don't need everyone to get it. You just need to stop hiding. You need to stop apologizing for being real. You need to stop shrinking for the sake of approval that doesn't last. It's okay to want to be liked, but it's not okay to lose yourself trying to earn it.
Avoiding discomfort. Most of what we call procrastination or distraction is actually just avoidance. You're not lazy, you're uncomfortable. And instead of facing that feeling, you're doing everything you can to get away from it. You check your phone, you open another tab, you scroll, you clean, you watch something. Anything but the thing you know you need to face. The thing that feels heavy, difficult, uncertain. We're taught to avoid discomfort from a young age. If something hurts, stop doing it. If something feels awkward, stay quiet. If something's hard, push it aside. The idea is that comfort equals safety. So when discomfort shows up, your instinct is to run. But the problem is, a lot of what you actually want is sitting on the other side of that feeling. Growth, change, peace, confidence. None of it comes without discomfort. You might want clarity, but that means facing confusion first. You might want to feel stronger, but that means sitting with your weakness for a while. You might want a better life, but that means stepping into situations where you don't have control. And most people never do that, not because they don't want to, but because they never learned how to sit with the hard parts of life without immediately trying to escape. Discomfort isn't the enemy. It's just a signal. It's your mind saying something important is happening here. But instead of listening, you try to shut it down. You convince yourself that the timing isn't right, that you need more energy, more motivation, more clarity. But deep down, you're just afraid of how it might feel to try and fail, or to try and change, or to try and be seen. Discomfort feels good in the short term. It gives you relief. But long term, it costs you. It builds guilt, regret, anxiety. Because the thing you're avoiding doesn't go away. It just waits. And the more you avoid it, the bigger it feels, the more power it has over you, until eventually you start avoiding your own life. You keep everything at a surface level. You stay safe, but you stop growing. You stop trying. You stop showing up. It doesn't have to be that way. Discomfort isn't something to fear. It's something to learn from. You don't need to fight it or push it away. You just need to stay with it long enough to see what it's trying to show you. Maybe it's pointing to something unresolved. Maybe it's asking you to stop pretending. Maybe it's trying to wake you up.
Avoiding discomfort doesn't protect you. It just delays the moment you'll eventually have to face. The conversation, the decision, the truth. And the longer you wait, the harder it gets. But when you stop running, something changes. You realize that the feeling you were so afraid of isn't permanent. It moves. It passes. It hurts, yes. But it also frees you. Because once you go through it, you're not scared of it anymore. You don't need to tiptoe around your life. You don't need to keep putting things off. You can face them, even if you don't have all the answers yet. You build that strength one small moment at a time, not by making huge leaps, but by choosing not to escape when it gets hard, by staying present when your mind wants to check out, by doing the thing you've been putting off, not because you're ready, but because it's time. It's not about being fearless. It's about being honest. You're allowed to feel afraid. You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to be uncomfortable. That doesn't mean something's wrong. It means you're moving. The people who grow are not the ones who avoid discomfort. They're the ones who learn how to carry it, how to work with it, how to let it be there without letting it stop them. Avoiding discomfort gives you a quiet, stagnant life. Facing it gives you a messy, unpredictable, real one. And even though that life is harder, it's also the only one that feels alive.
Losing yourself. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't wake up one day and realize you've lost yourself. It happens gradually, quietly, in small choices, in the things you don't say, in the parts of you that you start to ignore. You begin adjusting to the world around you, to the people you're close to the roles you've taken on. And somewhere in that process, your own voice gets quieter. You start doing what's expected, what's safe, what makes things easier. You smile when you're supposed to. You agree to things you don't care about. You tell yourself you're just being flexible, just being mature, just being easy to be around. And maybe you are, but you're also drifting, away from what you really think, away from what you really feel, away from what you really want. At first, it doesn't feel like a big deal. You're just going with the flow, being adaptable, being polite. But over time, you notice something's missing. You feel empty, tired, maybe even irritable, like you're always on, but never really present, like you're living your life from a distance, going through the motions, but not really in it. That's what losing yourself feels like. Not dramatic, just disconnected. And the scariest part is, on the outside, things might look fine. People think you're doing well. They like the version of you that shows up. The agreeable version. The helpful version. The one who always says yes. But inside, you're starting to wonder who that version even is. If it's really you, or just a version you created to avoid conflict, to be accepted, to be liked. You might even feel guilty for wanting more, for missing the parts of yourself you've hidden, for wanting to be more honest, more direct, more real. But the longer you wait, the harder it gets to come back, because by then, you've built a life around who you're supposed to be. And now, if you change, things might shift. People might leave. Things might get uncomfortable.
So you keep the peace and lose yourself in the process. This doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're fake. It means you're human. Most people lose themselves at some point. To relationships, to work, to routine, to survival. And most of them don't talk about it. They just keep going. Because they think it's normal to feel this disconnected, this muted, this tired. But deep down, something still pulls at you. The part of you that remembers who you used to be, what used to excite you, what used to matter. The way you used to speak before you learned to filter yourself. The way you used to feel before everything became about what others expect. That part is still there. It's quiet, but not gone. You don't find yourself again through some big dramatic change. You find yourself through small acts of honesty. Saying no when you mean no. Saying yes only when it feels right. Asking yourself what you actually want, not what will make others happy, not what looks good, but what feels right in your gut. It's uncomfortable at first, because you've trained yourself to adapt, to please, to fit. You've built your sense of worth on being who people need you to be. And now, stepping away from that feels selfish or wrong or risky. But it's not. It's necessary. You're allowed to outgrow things, even parts of yourself. You're allowed to change your mind, to take up space, to be misunderstood, to disappoint people who were never really seeing the real you in the first place. You don't owe anyone a version of you that keeps you small. Coming back to yourself doesn't mean you have to tear everything down. It just means you start paying attention. You stop agreeing out of habit. You stop hiding when things get real. You stop avoiding your own truth just to make someone else more comfortable. And slowly, you start to remember who you are. Not the polished version, not the convenient version, the real one. The one who thinks deeply, feels deeply, wants more. The one who has opinions, doubts, needs, edges. That version deserves to live, not just exist. You might lose people when you start showing up differently. You might lose comfort, but what you gain is worth more. Your energy, your clarity, your direction, your peace. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to stop hiding who you already are. The myth of control. Most people spend their lives trying to control things they can't. Outcomes, opinions, emotions, the future. We plan, prepare, overthink. We replay the past. We try to predict what might happen. We try to avoid mistakes before they even exist. We tell ourselves that if we just try hard enough, care enough, or think long enough, we can stay ahead of life, stay safe, stay certain. But it never really works. No matter how careful you are, things still go wrong. People still change. Plans still fall apart. Life still surprises you. And that's frustrating because you did everything right. You thought ahead. You made good choices. You played it safe. But even then, something went off script. That's when it hits you. Control is an illusion, a story we tell ourselves to feel less afraid. We don't like the idea of chaos, of randomness, of vulnerability. So we try to force order. We make rules, set routines, create expectations. But deep down, we know we're not really in charge. We know that all it takes is one call, one message, one accident to change everything. And the more we try to hold on, the more anxious we get, because life doesn't follow our grip. It moves how it wants to. You can do everything in your power to protect yourself from disappointment and still feel it. You can try to control how people see you and still be misunderstood. You can try to control your emotions and still feel overwhelmed. The truth is, the more you try to control, the more you end up resisting the reality you're actually in. And that resistance makes life harder. You start fighting everything that doesn't go according to plan. You take things personally. You blame yourself for things that were never yours to carry. You get stuck in the question, what if I had done something differently? Even when deep down, you know you couldn't have stopped it. You exhaust yourself trying to manage the unmanageable. But there's another way. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means shifting focus. It means asking, what can I actually control right now? Not in theory, not in someone else's mind. Right here, in this moment. You can control your response.
your effort, your honesty, your actions. That's it. That's where your power is. And once you accept that, things get lighter, not easier, but clearer.
You stop trying to be responsible for everyone else's feelings. You stop trying to prevent every possible mistake. You stop trying to create a perfect future before you've even lived the present. You let life move, and you move with it. That doesn't mean you stop planning or stop caring. It just means you stop pretending that your fear is making you safer, because it's not. It's just making you smaller, more rigid, more afraid. Real control comes from flexibility, from learning how to adjust, not obsess, from learning how to stay present, even when the future is uncertain, from trusting yourself to respond to whatever comes, not because you've predicted it, but because you've accepted that you can't predict everything. You don't have to be ready for every scenario. You just have to be real. You just have to be honest. You just have to be willing to show up, even when the outcome is unclear. Most of the peace you're looking for won't come from controlling more. It'll come from letting go of what you were never meant to hold in the first place. Control feels safe, but it's also heavy. Letting go feels risky, but it's also free. You're not supposed to have it all figured out. You're supposed to live, learn, adjust, grow, mess up, come back. That's not chaos. That's being alive. The sooner you accept that you can't control everything, the sooner you can start actually experiencing your life, not managing it, not editing it, not bracing for it, living it.
The fear of being ordinary. Most people won't say it out loud, but it's there. This quiet fear of being forgettable, of living a life that doesn't stand out, of working a job that no one talks about, of being one of the billions who come and go without making some huge impact. You grow up hearing that you're special, that you're meant to do great things, that you should stand out. But as you get older, you start to realize maybe you're not that different. Maybe you're just normal. And that scares people more than they're willing to admit. It's not about ego, it's about meaning. If you're ordinary, does that mean your life doesn't matter? Does that mean you failed? Does that mean you wasted your potential? You see people your age doing things that seem bigger, starting companies, building audiences, traveling constantly, going viral. And even if you don't care about those specific things, part of you still wonders, am I doing enough? You start comparing your timeline to theirs, your choices to theirs, your happiness to theirs. And even though you know social media isn't real life, it still gets to you because it looks like everyone else is living some extraordinary version of life while you're stuck in the same routine, same room, same job, same thoughts. And that thought creeps in. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I'm just average. But here's what no one tells you. Being ordinary isn't a failure. It's normal. Most people live quiet lives. Most people aren't famous or wildly successful or followed by thousands. Most people don't build legacies that are written about in books. But that doesn't mean their lives are meaningless. Because meaning doesn't come from scale. It comes from depth. You can live a small life and still live a full one. You can have ordinary days that are filled with real connection, real honesty, real impact. You can matter deeply to the people around you. You can leave a mark on someone's life in a way no stranger ever will.
But the fear of being ordinary tricks you into thinking you need to constantly be more productive, more interesting, more unique. And that pressure drains you. It disconnects you from the parts of your life that are already valuable. You overlook the things that are working, the things that are real, because they're not impressive enough to post or share or prove. You don't need to be extraordinary to live a good life. You don't need to be the best at anything to be respected. You don't need to build something huge to be remembered by the people who matter. The fear of being ordinary is really the fear of being invisible. But you're not invisible. You're just caught in a system that defines value in shallow terms: likes, status, money, fame. And the more you buy into that, the more you'll feel like you're falling behind. But there's another way to live. A way where small moments are enough, where connection is more important than recognition, where your day doesn't need to be productive to be meaningful, where your life doesn't need to look impressive to be full of value. You don't need to escape your ordinary life. You need to start seeing it clearly. The conversation with a friend that helped them through a hard day, the decision to stay when someone else needed you, the quiet strength it takes to keep showing up. None of that is flashy, but it's real. It matters. There's nothing wrong with dreaming big, but don't let the fear of being average keep you from living now. Don't let it push you into chasing things you don't care about or becoming someone you're not. You're not here to impress the world. You're here to live your life, to feel it, to shape it, to make it yours. And if that life looks simple from the outside, so what? You'll know the truth of it, and that's enough. Why we lie to ourselves. Everyone lies to themselves, not because they're trying to be dishonest, but because it's easier. Easier than facing the truth, easier than sitting with discomfort, easier than admitting that something needs to change. You tell yourself you're fine, even when you're not. You tell yourself you don't care, even when something cuts deep. You tell yourself you've moved on, even when you're still stuck. At first, these lies seem harmless. They even feel protective, like a way to keep moving, keep functioning, keep things from falling apart. You don't want to deal with the full weight of what's really going on, so you edit it. You water it down. You rewrite the story in a way that feels safer. But the problem is, those lies build up, and over time, they start to separate you from reality. You stop trusting yourself. You stop knowing what's real. You say things that sound right, but don't feel right. You nod along when something doesn't sit well. You explain your decisions using logic that you don't actually believe. And the worst part is, you get used to it. You get used to ignoring that quiet voice in the back of your mind, the one that keeps whispering, "This isn't the full truth." We lie to ourselves for all kinds of reasons: to avoid pain, to protect our image, to delay a hard decision, to keep the peace. But eventually, those lies start to cost us. They create confusion. They create distance between who we are and who we pretend to be. And the longer that gap stays open, the harder it becomes to feel anything clearly. You might tell yourself the job is fine, that it's just work, but deep down you feel drained every day. You might tell yourself the relationship is okay, that it's just going through a rough patch, but you haven't felt close in months. You might tell yourself that this isn't the right time to make a change, but if not now, then when?
Lying to yourself doesn't fix anything. It just postpones the truth. And the truth has a way of catching up, usually when you least expect it. In a breakdown, in a fight, in a quiet moment where it all hits at once.
But there's a reason the truth is so hard to face, because it often means loss, the loss of comfort, the loss of a story you've been telling yourself, the loss of who you thought you were. And that kind of honesty takes courage. It's not about being brutally honest all the time. It's about being real enough to say, I don't know what I'm doing right now, or I've been pretending to be okay, or I'm scared to change, but I can't keep doing this. That kind of truth doesn't always come with answers, but it clears space, space to think, space to breathe, space to stop performing and just be where you really are. And when you start telling the truth to yourself, even in small ways, you begin to rebuild trust. You stop needing constant reassurance from others. You stop second-guessing your every thought. Because now, you're not hiding from yourself. You're facing things directly. That clarity is uncomfortable, but it's freeing. You don't need to figure out your whole life overnight. You just need to stop running from what you already know deep down. The truth isn't your enemy. It's your starting point. What have you been avoiding? What are you afraid to admit? Not to anyone else, just to yourself. Start there.
The illusion of success. From the outside, success looks like the answer to everything. You work hard, reach your goals, check off your list, and then you're supposed to feel fulfilled. That's the story we're all told. That success will fix the anxiety, the self-doubt, the emptiness. That once you make it, everything will make sense. But it usually doesn't happen like that. Because success doesn't feel the way you expect it to. You achieve something, a promotion, a degree, a certain number in your bank account, and it feels good for a moment. You feel proud, relieved, maybe even excited. But that feeling fades quicker than you think, and then comes the question you didn't plan for. Now what? You thought success would give you lasting peace, but instead, it gave you a new set of pressures. You're afraid of losing what you gained. You feel like you have to keep proving yourself. You realize that getting what you wanted didn't fix what you were feeling. Because success is external, but meaning is internal. And if you're chasing success without understanding what actually matters to you, you'll always feel off. You'll keep moving the finish line. You'll keep raising the standard. You'll tell yourself that the next goal will finally make it feel worth it. But when you get there, the emptiness is still there too, just dressed up differently. This doesn't mean success is bad. It just means it's not enough on its own. We're taught to measure success in visible ways: money, status, applause, followers, results. But those things don't reflect how someone actually feels about their life. You can be admired and still feel unseen. You can be respected and still feel unsure. You can be successful and still feel numb. A lot of people are silently struggling with this. They're afraid to admit that the life they worked so hard to build doesn't actually feel like theirs. That it's impressive, but not fulfilling. That it checks all the boxes, but still feels like something is missing. And they don't say anything because what are you supposed to say? That the thing everyone wants doesn't feel as good as it looked? So they stay quiet. Keep grinding, keep achieving, keep trying to make it feel meaningful. But meaning doesn't come from status.
It comes from alignment, from knowing that what you're doing matches what you value, from knowing that you're not performing a version of success that was handed to you by someone else. You get to define what success means to you. Maybe it's freedom. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's creating something that lasts. Maybe it's doing work you actually care about, or having time for the people who matter most. But if you never stop to ask that question, if you never slow down long enough to think about what success feels like, not just what it looks like, you'll always be chasing someone else's version. And that chase never ends. The illusion of success is that it will save you, that it will make everything make sense. But what really matters is the process. How you live, how you show up, how you treat people, how you treat yourself. Real success isn't a destination. It's not a headline or a trophy. It's waking up in the morning and not feeling like you're living a life that belongs to someone else. So if you're chasing something right now, ask yourself why. Ask what you think it will give you, and then ask if there's another way to get that feeling without waiting for some external moment to hand it to you. Because you might already have more than you think. You just haven't slowed down enough to notice.
Trust issues. At some point, someone let you down. Maybe they said one thing and did another. Maybe they promised to stay and then left. Maybe they acted like they cared but never really showed up when it counted. And after that moment, whether you realized it or not, something shifted in you. You became more careful, less open, less quick to believe what people say. That's where trust issues begin. Not from weakness, but from experience. You learn that people aren't always what they seem, that words don't always match actions, that someone can be close to you and still betray you. And after that happens once or twice, you start building walls. Not out of bitterness, but out of protection. You tell yourself you're just being smart, cautious, realistic. And maybe you are, but slowly that caution turns into distance. You start assuming the worst before people even show you who they are. You pull back before anything can go wrong. You question kindness, doubt intentions. You replay conversations in your head looking for signs of dishonesty, even when none are there. And the worst part? You want to trust. You want to connect. You want to let people in. But something in you is always preparing for the moment they switch, the moment they leave, the moment things fall apart. It's exhausting. Trust issues don't just affect your relationships with others. They affect how you see yourself. You start blaming yourself for being too open in the past, for not noticing the red flags, for caring too much. You stop listening to your instincts because now you confuse fear with intuition. You think staying guarded will keep you safe, but it often just keeps you isolated. Yes, some people will hurt you. That's true. But not everyone will. Not everyone is going to lie. Not everyone is going to leave. Not everyone is playing a game. But if you treat everyone like they're the same as the ones who hurt you, you end up pushing away the people who actually want to stay.
So, how do you trust again? You don't do it all at once. You don't force yourself to believe everything. You just start slowly. You watch people, not just for what they say, but what they consistently do. You give people the chance to show you who they are before making assumptions. You ask questions. You set boundaries. You stay honest. And most importantly, you forgive yourself for needing time. You're not paranoid. You're not broken. You're someone who got hurt. That matters, but it doesn't have to define you forever. Trust is a risk. There's no way around that. But living without it is its own kind of pain, because connection without trust isn't really connection. It's a performance. It's walking on eggshells. It's constantly bracing for impact. There will always be uncertainty in relationships. always some level of vulnerability. But not everyone is out to use you. Not everyone is going to let you down. And the only way to find out who's real is to stop assuming that everyone isn't. That takes time, patience, courage, but it's worth it. Because trust is the foundation of everything that actually matters: love, friendship, teamwork, growth. And without it, everything starts to feel shallow, unstable, temporary. You don't need to trust blindly. You just need to stay open enough to find the people who are worth the risk. The fear of missing out. It's everywhere, even if you don't talk about it. That quiet, uneasy feeling that you're behind, that you're not doing enough, that while you're sitting at home, someone else is out there living the life you should be living. The fear of missing out isn't just about events or experiences. It's about meaning, about purpose, about the creeping thought that your life might be passing you by. You see someone traveling and wonder why you're still stuck in the same place. You see someone achieving something and question your own pace. You see people posting, celebrating, moving, and you start to feel like you're late for something you didn't even know you signed up for. That's what FOMO really is. It's not just envy. It's insecurity. The worry that your life doesn't measure up. That while you were being careful, someone else was being bold. While you were planning, someone else was taking action. While you were doubting yourself, someone else was taking your place. And the internet makes it worse, because everywhere you look, people are curating their highlight reels. They're showing their best angles, their biggest moments, their proudest wins. And even when you know it's not the whole story, it still gets to you. It makes your life feel small, slow, boring. But here's the thing. No one posts the in-between. They don't show the doubts, the waiting, the days filled with nothing special. They don't show the meals alone, the fights, the breakdowns, the long hours of second-guessing. And yet, that's what life mostly is. In-between moments, quiet growth, private effort, decisions you make when no one's watching. And just because it's not visible doesn't mean it's not valuable. FOMO makes you think you need to catch up, that you need to do more, be more, experience more right now. But chasing everything means you end up valuing nothing. You jump from one thing to the next without ever being fully present. You say yes to things that don't actually matter to you just because you're afraid to feel left out.
But living that way keeps you scattered. It keeps you disconnected from what actually matters to you, not to everyone else. There will always be something you're not doing, some place you're not going, some opportunity you didn't take. That's life. You can't be everywhere. You can't have every experience. And trying to is a guaranteed way to feel like you're always behind. The solution to FOMO isn't doing more. It's choosing better. It's asking yourself, do I actually want this, or do I just want to feel like I'm not missing out? There's a difference. You don't need to fill your life with activity to feel valuable. You need to live it with intention. You need to find what matters to you and commit to it, even if it's quiet, even if it doesn't look impressive, even if no one claps. Because peace doesn't come from having everything. It comes from knowing you don't need everything. You're not late. You're not behind. You're just on a different road. And different doesn't mean wrong.
The life you didn't live. There's the life you're living, and then there's the one that exists only in your mind. The version of yourself that chose differently. The job you didn't take, the place you didn't move to, the relationship you walked away from, the risk you talked yourself out of. And sometimes that version of your life haunts you more than the mistakes you actually made. It shows up when you're stuck in a routine, when you're wondering if this is really it, when you think back to a time where the road split and you didn't take the path you wanted to. Or maybe you didn't even realize it was a choice at the time. You just did what seemed practical, what seemed expected. And now, years later, you're looking back, wondering what could have been. You don't talk about it much, because life went on. You have responsibilities now. People rely on you. And maybe things aren't terrible. But still, there's this quiet thought in the background. What if I missed my real life? That thought can eat away at you, not loudly, but persistently. It's not about regret over one single moment. It's about the slow realization that maybe you never really asked yourself what you actually wanted. Maybe you made decisions based on fear, or pressure, or timing. And now the version of life you never lived feels more real than the one you're in. You imagine it. You replay it. You wonder who you'd be if you had followed that impulse, if you had trusted your gut, if you hadn't settled, if you hadn't listened to other people more than yourself.
But here's the truth. No one lives all their lives. No one gets to experience every possibility. No matter what you choose, there will always be another version of life that stayed just out of reach. And if you're not careful, you'll romanticize it. You'll convince yourself it would have solved everything. You'll place all your happiness in a version of reality that never existed. But that's not fair to yourself, because the only life you can actually shape is the one you're in now. And it's not over. It's not too late. Maybe you didn't make the bold choice before, but you can still start making different ones now. Maybe you ignored your instincts once, but they're still there and you can listen now. The idea of the life you didn't live can either become a shadow that follows you or a wake-up call that changes you. You can keep fantasizing about what might have been, or you can use that feeling to get honest about what's still possible. Not everything can be undone, but a lot can be redirected. And even small shifts can bring you closer to a life that feels more real to you. One that's not based on expectations. One that's not lived on autopilot. One that doesn't leave you wondering what it would feel like to actually show up fully. You don't need to abandon everything. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. Start asking the questions you once avoided. Start making the decisions you postponed. Start becoming the version of yourself that you keep seeing in your mind. Not in some perfect, ideal way, but in small, real, daily ways. The life you didn't live doesn't have to haunt you. It can guide you, but only if you stop running from it and start listening to what it's trying to show you.
Living on autopilot. You wake up, you check your phone, you go through the same motions, the same apps, the same thoughts. You go to work or class or wherever you're expected to be. You do what you need to. You talk to the people you always talk to. You scroll during breaks. You eat without really tasting anything. And before you know it, the day's over. And it looks exactly like the day before. It's not a bad life, necessarily. Nothing dramatic is wrong, but it all feels flat. Repetitive. Predictable. You're not unhappy, but you're not really here.
either. That's what autopilot feels like. You stop questioning your routines. You stop noticing your surroundings. You stop checking in with yourself. You just move, respond, react, do the next thing. You live out a schedule instead of a life. Days blur together. You start measuring time by deadlines, not by moments. And deep down, you start to feel disconnected. From yourself, from others, from everything. And it doesn't usually hit all at once. It builds slowly, week after week, month after month, until one day you realize you can't remember the last time you really felt present or excited or genuinely engaged in what you were doing. When you try to think about what would make you feel alive again, you draw a blank. Because that's what autopilot takes from you. Awareness of what you want, of what you feel, of what matters to you beyond just getting through the day. Most people don't even realize they're living this way because it looks normal. It looks productive. It looks like being a responsible adult. But if you never pause long enough to ask why you're doing what you're doing, you'll end up spending your life completing tasks that mean nothing to you. So how do you snap out of it? You don't need a drastic life change. You don't need to quit everything or run away. You just need to interrupt the pattern. You need to stop long enough to ask real questions. Do I like how I'm spending my time? Does this routine still serve me? Have I become numb to my own life? Then you start making space. Not just physical space, but mental space. You put your phone down more often. You start walking without a destination. You take time to think without distracting yourself. You listen to your thoughts instead of drowning them out. And slowly, you begin to notice what you've been missing. The things you do on autopilot are usually the things you haven't questioned. The habits that formed out of convenience, or pressure, or survival. But they don't have to stay that way. You can update them. You can replace them. You can start living a little more on purpose. That might mean saying no to things that used to feel automatic. It might mean adding something small to your day that breaks the pattern. A conversation, a creative outlet, a walk, a real moment of stillness. It might mean revisiting an old interest, or finally exploring a new one. You don't have to feel stuck just because you've been stuck. And you don't need to wait for a crisis to wake you up. You can choose to pay attention now, to step off autopilot even for 5 minutes and ask yourself, am I actually living today or just getting through it? That one question might change everything. The feeling of being watched. Not literally. Not in the sense of cameras or people spying on you, but in a more invisible, psychological way. Like you're always being observed, judged, measured. Like whatever you do, someone is silently watching, forming opinions, waiting for you to mess up or to be better than you are. It's not about paranoia. It's about pressure. You start living like there's an audience. Even when no one's around, you edit yourself. You think twice before saying what you really think. You worry about how you'll be perceived. You rehearse conversations in your mind. You imagine how your choices might look from the outside. What will people say? How will they react? Will they still respect you? That quiet, constant awareness
starts to shape your behavior. You make safer choices. You say what's acceptable. You hold back your real opinions. You downplay your emotions. You try to seem put together, even when you're not. And maybe you don't even realize it, because it's been this way for so long. You've adapted to being seen, or at least to the idea of being seen. And the strange thing is, it's not always real. Most of the time, no one is watching that closely. People are too busy worrying about themselves. But the feeling of being watched stays with you. It becomes internal. You become your own critic, your own audience, your own judge. You start observing yourself from the outside in, and that creates distance from your own experience. You stop asking what you feel and start wondering how it looks. You stop asking what you want and start asking what will be accepted. You become more focused on image than truth, on fitting in than being honest.
It happens in small ways. You dress for approval, not comfort. You laugh when you don't find something funny. You nod along just to avoid standing out. You keep your voice slower, your energy contained, your real self edited. Why? Because somewhere along the way, you learned that being fully yourself wasn't safe, that being real came with risks, judgment, rejection, embarrassment. So you adjusted. You became someone others could accept. But it comes at a cost. The more you live like you're being watched, the less connected you feel to your own life. You're in it, but not fully. You're always calculating, always aware, always slightly performing. And that gets exhausting. So how do you step out of that? You start by noticing it. That moment when you hesitate before posting something honest. That moment when you replay your words hours after the conversation. That moment when you catch yourself filtering your personality just to feel safer. Those are clues. They tell you where you're still living for an audience. Then you do the harder part. You practice not performing. You say something honest even if it feels awkward. You show up without curating yourself. You allow silence instead of filling it with small talk. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop trying to convince people of your worth. Because the truth is, the more you chase approval, the more disconnected you become from who you really are. And ironically, the more you show up as your real self, the more people actually connect with you. You don't need to be impressive. You just need to be present. Not everything needs to be seen. Not everything needs to be explained. Not everything needs to be liked. You're allowed to live without being watched.
Boredom and the search for meaning. No one talks about boredom much. It sounds too simple to be serious. But underneath it, there's often something much deeper happening. That restlessness you feel when nothing holds your attention, the discomfort of silence, the frustration of doing the same things over and over and not knowing why. You scroll, you switch apps, you start a show, then pause it. You open a book, then check your notifications. You keep looking for something to hold on to, something that sparks a feeling, something that pulls you out of that dull in-between space. But nothing does. It all feels temporary, surface level, boring. And that's the clue. It's not just that you're bored, it's that you're disconnected from meaning. Because boredom isn't always about having nothing to do. Sometimes it's about doing things that don't matter to you anymore. It's about routines that used to feel purposeful, but now feel hollow. It's about knowing something's off, but not knowing what to replace it with. That's when the search begins. Not for entertainment, but for something real.
You start asking questions you usually avoid. Why am I doing this every day? Do I even like any of it? What would I do if no one was watching? If nothing needed to be posted? If success didn't need to look a certain way? Those questions don't come with instant answers, and that's uncomfortable. So you distract yourself again. But the boredom keeps coming back because it's not just a lack of stimulation, it's a signal. A sign that your life might be filled with tasks, but not with meaning. Most people try to outrun boredom. They stay busy, fill every second, but still, something feels missing. And that's because real meaning doesn't come from activity. It comes from alignment, from knowing that what you're doing connects with something deeper inside you. Not every minute of the day, but enough to make you feel grounded. That could be anything: creating something, helping someone, learning, building, feeling challenged, being seen, feeling useful. Whatever it is, it has to matter to you, not to your timeline, not to your followers, not to your resume. And finding it usually requires stillness. That's the paradox. You have to sit with the boredom long enough to hear what it's trying to tell you. You have to stop numbing it with noise and let it guide you back to what you've been ignoring. Maybe it's something you used to care about but let go of. Maybe it's something you've always wanted to explore but never gave yourself permission to try. Maybe it's a part of you that got buried under responsibilities. Whatever it is, it's not gone, just quiet, waiting. The truth is, boredom is often a doorway, a pause before a shift, an invitation to change something. It's not the enemy, it's a signal. The longer you listen, the more honest you become with yourself about what matters, about what doesn't, about what needs to go and what's missing that you haven't yet allowed in. You don't need a bigger distraction. You need a deeper connection. The fear of starting over. Most people stay in the same place, not because they're comfortable, but because they're scared of starting again. A job that drains you, a relationship that isn't working, a city you no longer connect with. You know it's not right. You feel it in your body, in your mood, in your sleep, but you keep going because starting over feels like failure. There's this belief that once you've invested enough time in something, you have to stick it out. That walking away means you wasted everything. So instead of starting over, you keep adjusting. You lower your standards. You tell yourself it's not that bad. You stay out of habit or fear or pride. But starting over doesn't mean you failed. It means you refused to settle. Still, it's hard, because starting over doesn't just mean letting go. It means facing the unknown, losing your routine, starting from scratch, reintroducing yourself, being new at something again. And if you've spent years building a certain identity, the idea of tearing it down feels terrifying. You start to think things like, what if it's worse? What if I regret it? What if I'm too old, too late, too tired to begin again? So you delay. Another month, another year, another excuse. But time keeps moving. And deep down, you know it. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. You start to forget what it feels like to live with curiosity, or energy, or hope. Here's the truth. You're allowed to pivot. You're allowed to admit something no longer fits. You're allowed to want more, even if people don't understand it. You don't need permission to start again. The cost of staying stuck is often higher than the cost of starting over. And while it's hard at first, there's something powerful about rebuilding. You get to choose differently. You get to do it with more wisdom this time. You get to align your life with who you've become, not who you used to be. Starting over is not a step back. It's a return to what matters. When peace feels boring. There's something strange that happens when you finally find peace. After chaos, after instability, after chasing and running and pushing, you land in a quiet place. Life slows down. The noise fades. The problems aren't as loud anymore. And you're surprised to find something you didn't expect. Boredom. You thought peace would feel satisfying, and sometimes it does, but other times it feels like something's missing, like you need a little chaos to feel alive again. This is more common than people admit. If you've spent years in survival mode, your body gets used to stress. Your mind gets addicted to fixing things, to solving problems, to the emotional highs and lows. And when that stops, you feel off, like you're floating, like you don't know what to do without the tension. So you create new problems. You overthink. You dig up old wounds. You chase conflict. You fill your days with distractions. Not because things are going wrong, but because you don't know how to live without that edge. But peace isn't the absence of energy. It's just a different kind. It's stability, clarity, presence. It's being able to enjoy small things again. It's feeling safe enough to pause without guilt. But you have to learn how to receive it, to not ruin it out of habit, to not confuse calm with emptiness. Sometimes the work isn't getting to peace. It's learning how to live in it without destroying it.
Chasing the wrong goals. You work hard. You stay busy. You aim higher. You check the boxes. But somewhere in the process, something starts to feel off. You hit a goal, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel lost. Like, that's it? This happens more often than people admit. You chase something for years, thinking it's what you want. You finally get it. And instead of satisfaction, you feel emptiness. It's confusing, because you were told this was the way, that success would fix the insecurity, that the promotion would bring confidence, that the relationship would bring peace, that money would finally make you feel safe. And maybe it does, for a moment, but then it fades. That's the danger of chasing the wrong goals. They look right from the outside. They're socially approved, they get you praise, attention, validation, but deep down, they don't fit. They're not connected to who you really are. They're connected to who you think you're supposed to be. You chase them because they're safe, because they make sense, because they give you a sense of control. And you ignore the voice inside that's quietly saying, this isn't it. That voice isn't the enemy. It's the guide.
Most people never slow down long enough to question their goals. They just keep pushing, climbing, grinding, hoping that somewhere at the top it'll all make sense. But the further you climb the wrong mountain, the further you get from yourself. Real success isn't about checking boxes. It's about alignment, doing what actually lights you up, what challenges you and fulfills you, what feels right when no one's watching. It's not always shiny. It's not always impressive, but it's yours. And it often takes courage to admit that a goal you worked hard for isn't what you want anymore. But there's no shame in changing direction. In fact, it's smart. It means you're growing. You're being honest. You're valuing your internal world more than external approval. It's not too late to recalibrate. You don't need to abandon everything, but you do need to stop chasing what was never yours to begin with. Because the wrong goal, even if you achieve it, will never feel like enough. Why happiness feels temporary. You have good days, good news, good moments. And for a while, it feels light, easy, like maybe things are finally clicking. But it doesn't last. It fades, quickly. And you're left wondering, why can't I hold on to happiness? This isn't about being ungrateful or negative. It's about something deeper, how we've been taught to think about happiness. For most people, happiness is a destination, something to reach, to earn, to win. You work for it, plan for it, hope for it. But even when you get it, it slips away, and you start over, always chasing, never arriving. That's because happiness, the way we've been sold it, isn't designed to last. It's based on external things, events, achievements, circumstances, things you can't always control. So when they shift, your sense of happiness goes with them. And it becomes a cycle. Something good happens, you feel high. Something normal happens, you feel low. You start believing that unless your life is constantly exciting, constantly successful, constantly improving, you're failing. But happiness isn't supposed to be constant. No emotion is. You are not broken because you don't feel happy all the time. You're human. The problem isn't that happiness is temporary. The problem is that we expect it to be permanent. We build our lives around this idea that once everything is perfect, happiness will stay. But perfection doesn't exist. Life is messy. People change. Things break. Plans fall through. And if your happiness depends on stability, you'll always feel disappointed. Real happiness isn't about constant pleasure. It's about meaning, about knowing that your life reflects who you are, that what you do matters to you, that your connections are real, that you're growing, that you're honest with yourself. And those things don't always feel exciting. Sometimes they're quiet, unimpressive, boring even. But they last. You can still have hard days and feel a sense of purpose. You can still struggle and know you're on the right path. You can cry and still be okay. The goal isn't to be happy every second. The goal is to build a life that still makes sense, even when the feelings come and go, because they will. That's how emotions work. Let them pass. Let them teach you. Let them move through you. Happiness will return, not because you forced it, but because you stopped chasing it. Rewriting your inner narrative. You talk to yourself every day, even if you don't say the words out loud. You tell yourself who you are, what you can and can't do, what kind of person you are, what your limits are, what you deserve, what people probably think about you. And over time, those thoughts become your reality. Not because they're true, but because you repeat them so often, you stop questioning them. That's your inner narrative, the running story you live inside. And most people never write it consciously. It gets shaped by experiences, what people said to you as a kid, the things you got praised or punished for, the moments that embarrassed you, the relationships that made you doubt yourself. Piece by piece, you build a quiet identity, one that lives underneath your choices. It shows up in small ways. You hesitate to try something new, not because you're incapable,
but because somewhere along the way, you decided you weren't that kind of person. You avoid certain conversations, not because you don't care, but because you've convinced yourself you're not good with words. You stay in situations that drain you, not because you don't want better, but because part of you believes you don't deserve it. That's the power of the narrative. It sets the boundaries of what you think is possible. And the hardest part is, it often feels like truth. You don't even recognize it as a story. It just feels like you. But here's the thing. That voice in your head isn't always accurate. It's just familiar. And familiarity doesn't equal truth. If you listen closely, you'll start to notice where your story was written by someone else. A parent's criticism, a teacher's doubt, a failure you internalized too deeply, a time you were rejected and took it personally. Those experiences shaped the story, but they don't have to dictate the rest of it.
You can update the narrative. You don't have to lie to yourself. You just have to start asking different questions. Instead of, why am I like this? Try, who told me I had to be this way? Instead of, why can't I handle this? Ask, when did I first believe I wasn't strong? Instead of repeating the same conclusions, interrupt them, challenge them, pause before you automatically agree with your inner voice, especially when it's being harsh. Your mind is not your enemy. It's just echoing what it's learned, and you can teach it something new. That starts with awareness, with catching the script mid-sentence and asking, is this helping me or holding me back? Then, slowly, you begin replacing old lines with better ones. Not fake positivity, but real, grounded truth. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to see yourself differently. You're allowed to become more than what your past predicted. It won't happen overnight. You'll fall back into the old story sometimes, but every time you interrupt it, you weaken its grip. Every time you speak a better truth, you strengthen the new one. And little by little, the story changes. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped telling yourself that you couldn't handle it. Not because people believed in you, but because you started believing yourself. Not because everything around you shifted, but because you did. Your story isn't finished, and you're allowed to take the pen back.